Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Rich Perez welcoming you back to the Rundown. Of course, joined in with my co-host all the way out in Miami, Kason Davis. We have a special guest in the building with us today, beat writer over at The Athletic, covering the WNBA and Uconn, Miss Charlotte Carroll.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Doing very good. How are you doing?
Doing good.
So my first question to you would be was what made you want to get into the sports journalism field?
So I always wanted to be a writer, that no good at math or science, so I knew it had to be writing. So I took journalism in high school and went into college and took a sports journalism like 101 class that they offered, which was really cool. So I liked that a lot and figured that would be a good place to start. I grew up a White Sox fan, an Illinois fan, which is my alma mater. So that was kind of a natural tie-in, and it worked out well, and I've really enjoyed it because with sports you can kind of tell so many different stories. So you get the best of both worlds.
Jason?
Okay. Oh no. Okay. So you're from Illinois. How was it growing up like in Illinois?
It's good. So I'm from Chicago, grew up in the city.
Oh,
I
no.
went to, do you, are you, yeah, I'm not from like a small town in Illinois.
Uh,
But Chicago is a great place to grow up, and it's such a sports centric city. So that was really fun with the rivalry Cubs and Sox to have that.
did you play any sports growing up? And if you did, what sports did you play?
Very poorly. Played softball. I was on my high school golf team for I think 3 years it was. So not very good at that either, but it was a lot of fun. Just I think softball, golf. I think that was everything that I played.
That's good. Sorry.
No, no,
I
no.
guess the next question I wanted to ask is, you kind of talked about your high school experience and how you kind of got into writing. How was your college experience? Because I know like here at the U, we kind of have like a student paper, and we kind of get to go on the back and with the media and things like that. So how was your time in college, like as reporting and things like that?
Yeah, no, I worked for the student newspaper. It was the Daily Illini down on campus. So I did that for all 4 years. And then I did outside internships as well, not related to the student newspaper, but it was a lot of fun. I covered club sports for my first semester, moved to softball actually, and then started covering football for my freshman, or excuse me, sophomore and junior seasons. And then I was the sports editor my senior year. So it was I loved working at the student newspaper. Hope you both are, or did some version of it in your college experience. It was a good time because not only you got the experience, but then you got to hang out with your friends too. So
What were some of your like favorite moments in college, being able to cover some clubs and sports over at the student paper?
sure. So I was at Illinois at a very strange time. There was a lot of scandal. In addition to they weren't a really great team while I was there, the football team. So I wouldn't call that necessarily a favorite moment, but it was a good learning experience in terms of just like getting to deal with like national media coming in for the coaching change and coaching hires and director changes. So it was very learning like centric, which was very helpful, I think, for kind of putting me on to the next job. And then like a fun thing, when I was a sophomore, they made what was the bowl game? It was a bowl game down in Texas, and I can't remember it for the life of me, but they like won it to get to the bowl game on the like last game of the semester. They got to go bowling, playing Northwestern as the rival, I guess, at Illinois, when just being down in Champaign
Oops.
versus Evanston. So they beat Northwestern up in Evanston. So that was a really fun game, just because that was probably the best football season that I got to cover while I was there, and the only bowl game that they'd been to while I was in college. And then basketball was kind of not necessarily a joke, but they didn't make the tournament all 4 years while I was there. So I had football, one bowl game getting me through the college years.
Um, I guess I'm kind of jumping a little bit ahead, but like
No, no.
you mentioned like hoping like both of us had written for student papers and things like that. For some people that want to get into this field and maybe don't have the excuse me, the opportunity to be able to write for a student paper, but they might still be studying like communications, hoping to get into the journalism field. Like, what type of advice would you have for those people?
No, I think definitely I know it's hard in college because you're trying to balance so many different things. It may not be feasible. But if you can find a way to just, even if it's something small, maybe it's not the student newspaper, but some type of just journalism experience, whether even if it's a, I don't know, summer internship or like some type of experience, or even just reaching out to industry connections of some capacity, if you're able to just be like, hey, I'm a student. I'd love to talk with you about your experience. I think most people, unless they're really mean, are pretty receptive to that. They just want to, I mean, I had so many people when I was in school looking out for me. So it's nice to be able to repay the favor if people ask for me for that. I mean, I don't even feel like I'm doing that much. I'm just spewing nonsense. So if you guys find it helpful, that's great. But I think a lot of people in the industry feel the same way, is that there was someone for them who looked out for them. And if they can even just 30-minute conversation or whatever that turns into, they're usually pretty happy to do that.
So, how, you know, I'm assuming that you interned, and then, you know, right after your internship, you probably got right into the industry, or was that did it take a little time for you to break out into the industry?
I got really lucky. It was a matter of kind of timing for me, and that's unfortunately, and a good thing, I guess, the way this thing works. So I interned the summer before my senior year. I was in New York City at Field and Stream magazine through the American Society of Magazine Editors, which I don't know anything about fields or streams for the most part. I just got that because it was like placed through the program, and it was a great experience because I got to do editing, I got to do writing, even was a hand model for a video, which I can now say as a fun fact at parties and stuff. Very random. But that experience then helped me get my next internship. So I graduated, but I didn't go into a full-time job right away. I took another internship just because it was a good opportunity. I was a Dow Jones intern. So then during that, actually my senior year, my friend had saw on Twitter that a columnist from SI was looking for female sports editors to talk with. So my friend was like, hey, you should talk with Charlotte. So I ended up like connecting with him and just answered some questions just via email, which was great. Didn't really think about anything. And then in June, when I was at my internship, someone from SI reached out being like, hey, we got your name from so-and-so. We might have an opening, would love to connect, yada, yada. So then I kind of went through that talking process. And then after I finished my internship, they didn't have an opening when I first spoke with them. But then once like a few days after I finished my internship, I was like talking about job stuff for SI. So I got very, very fortunate where I got a job right away. But I know that's not always the case. And a lot of my friends, it took a little bit, but it takes a little bit and perseverance, but it's worth it when it all kind of falls into place.
Yeah, well, taking it from there, how'd you end up at the Athletic, I guess, from where you just told us getting your first job to now working at the Athletic?
So we go from the highs of that first job and how easy that was to almost 2 years later, luckily past the 2 years mark, I was laid off from SI in, when was that? Early October. They were bought by new ownership, so they laid off a bunch of us. And as a young professional, especially just being so young and thinking I was at SI, which is an awesome opportunity, just very like stressful and very scared and very worried after that happened. So then with the Athletic, someone I guess had gotten my name from somebody else, and a couple weeks after I was laid off, they had reached out and I was kind of just connected. So it was very like, again, random connection. I know that's not very helpful for college students and recent grads, because you think like, how does that stuff happen? And it really is like these really random connections. So that's where when you go back to those like 30-minute phone calls with alums or professionals, you have no idea how those can help you.
Yeah, definitely. To take it back to college real fast, I always like to ask everyone, did you have a favorite team that you covered? Maybe not like the team, but like maybe like there's something that you liked about the team that made it like your favorite team to cover while you were there, like in college?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Let's see. I think it would have been because the players kind of, you feel like you grow up, not necessarily grow up with them, but they're on the team for a few years. So maybe it would have been my junior year, just because I'd covered the team for 2 years before I moved into that sports editor role. And you start to develop those relationships a little bit better, because it's a little scary coming in as a sophomore in college, and you're talking to all these people you've never really met and all these faces and stuff. So then the second year around, you have a better idea for them, and the stories can sometimes become a little bit better because of that, and the relationships you've been able to build.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was gonna ask now. You cover the men's, the women's, and the WNBA. How'd that end up happening at the Athletic?
That's kind of what they offered, and I was like, sure, let's do it. It's kind of crazy, and trying to balance isn't always easy, but it's been a learning game. So been a learning curve and a learning game. So, but
Yeah. How do you end up working that out? Like, what if like the men's and the women's have a game on the same day? Like, how does that end up like kind of working out for you?
I have a very large headache. Just kidding. It works out. We have kind of planned it where you just kind of take it as it comes and see. Being my first season, so I started in December, and then I was kind of thrown mid-season into the coverage. So I just kind of started covering, and then I was just doing it, and we kind of were just taking it game by game. And I was lucky that there wasn't too much conflict, and if there was conflict, it might have been an away game versus a home game. So it was kind of just like whichever seemed a little bit more important, or whatever like the standings reflected at the time. And luckily the women are so dominant that towards like the mid-season where there was the most conflict, it wasn't too hard to decide, if less like it just kind of worked out schedule wise where it wasn't too bad. So I'm not sure how that will pan out this season with everything happening, and if it's going to be in a condensed format, but a fun challenge to think about. Better than no basketball.
Well, you said you well, actually I think you were telling us this off air, but you started working for the Athletic around December.
Yes.
Okay, so this is your first season being able to cover the WNBA.
It is.
What number one, were you an avid follower of the WNBA before you got that job, and like how do you feel like, because I think unfortunately when it comes to like the women's game, they don't get the kind of the fanfare that the men's game gets as much, which like I said is very unfortunate. There's a lot of very talented women in the WNBA, and it's definitely a fun league to watch, and I'm sure cover.
Mm-hmm.
What's it been like being able to cover the WNBA this season, specifically with everything going on and then being in a bubble?
It's been, so I guess the first question, I wasn't a huge follower before, and I'm kind of bummed I missed out on everything. And I knew basic stuff, like you can't not know who Diana Taurasi or Sue Bird is, but not to the extent that I was. And I would do a little coverage at SI because I should have said I covered breaking news at Sports Illustrated. So kind of dipped my hands into everything, which was really helpful just to get a sense for everything that was going on. And then going into this season, I was lucky enough with Uconn being such a powerhouse. I feel like so many wonderful WNBA players have come out of that school. So that was such a great way to start season prep, I guess we could call it, because I was learning about, as I was writing stories, sometimes these people came into play, whatever. But then with everything coming to a crash in the beginning of March when everything shut down, it was very weird and very strange at first, not knowing what was going to happen, because WNBA is you have to give them so much credit because they end the college season, and the Final Four would have been the beginning of April, and the draft was scheduled just for 2 weeks later. And that is such a hard and unfortunate timing schedule sometimes. To go from that to that. So I guess, everyone had time off, and it would have been an easy transition, but it was good. I got some more time to get adjusted to things and kind of go from one to the other. But it's been a great time so far to just cover and start learning and telling stories of these players and these athletes. And they're really good. And the commitment to social justice is even more impressive, and just how much these players and these athletes have been doing this since before any of the men. I think, don't quote me on the time frame of it, but since 2016 they were participating with Colin Kaepernick and just all of these important things that they and Maya Moore are sitting out. Just so many impressive women in this league. So that's, I think, the basketball alone is impressive, but just their commitment to that and how much they're willing to risk just to improve people's lives, and it's really great to watch.
Well, I know you said you weren't like an avid follower before that, but being able to, I guess you would probably have a sense of, the atmosphere and the climate of the WNBA. So more of a specific question for you. I've always felt like the WNBA has really needed like that one player. They've had a lot of talented players over the years, even like some amazing players well before any of our times. But I've always felt like they needed that one player, to kind of take them into more of a limelight. And it seemed like Sabrina IsESCO of the New York Liberty is kind of could be that person. Like when she got drafted number one, do you feel like it's kind of a match made in heaven for what she's able to bring from a fan standpoint in the market of New York? And, number two, like, did you see any difference from when she made it into the league? Unfortunately, she got hurt, but did you see any difference from what it was before to how it's been since she's been in the league?
I can't really talk to the before, just because, like, I wouldn't feel comfortable talking about that because I just really haven't watched, so I don't think it's fair. But she definitely brings a different added youthful energy. I mean, there's so many impressive stars, but you think about like the names, or the top one that when I would think about WNBA before coming into this job was really like Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird.
Mm-hmm.
And those players are both in their mid to upper 30s. They're getting there older where they're going to be out of the league in a couple years. So to have the younger players, I mean, besides Sabrina, there's so many, Asia Wilson, there's just so many other stars. But Sabrina, like you said, brings a different type of star power and she's so impressive. So I think there's definitely like brings fresh energy. And there was the new CBA that the WNBA agreed to in January. So this season had so much energy and potential going into the start of it. So I think it was just so important that they played whatever the format was just to keep that momentum going. So it kind of stinks that Sabrina got injured, but I don't think that's hampered the energy down in the bubble. I mean, there's craziness happening every night. There's some really impressive games. You've got the Sky and Aces rivalry that's still going from the playoffs last year. I cover the Connecticut Sun is like my more like one-on-one beat, I suppose, is what I check in on a more regular basis. And that just like they were in the WNBA finals last year.
Mm-hmm.
So they had come back, lost their star, Jonquel Jones, and they started 0-5 this season, but now I think it's 8-9 is what their record is, maybe off the top of my head. So they had come back to do that in the span of 20 days is crazy to watch, as you've seen from the NBA bubble too, just what kind of can happen down there.
Yeah, definitely. You kind of talked about how the women kind of been on the social justice thing kind of early. Why do you think they kind of been more on it kind of before than like the NBA is? The NBA is kind of on it now with everything that's going on, but like you said, they've been doing it for years. They're kind of like behind Kaepernick from the beginning. Why do you think it's so easy for them to kind of get on board from the start?
I mean, it's hard to say, but I think it almost, the pay is less. I mean, I'm just spitballing, but they've just been committed to it for so long, and they just know more what it means, not necessarily social justice, but just to have a stake in the league and a stake in like priorities, I guess, if that kind of makes sense. That doesn't necessarily, I guess, I don't know really why they've been on it from the beginning. I don't know if I have the right answer. I think there can be a lot of that, but just they've had to stick their necks out for so many things, not just about social justice. So I think it's almost ingrained in the league as you're fighting for that attention maybe. And that doesn't necessarily reflect, but I think everyone, I don't know, it's really inspiring to see. That was a very bad ramble. No, I just think they know what it means.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, sorry to cut you off.
No, not that NBA players don't, but I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I was gonna say you like you said, it's your first season covering the WNBA. How's it been trying to cover them from home, basically, because it's your first season? So how's it been trying to cover from home with everything that's going on with the bubble and things like that, and still trying to build these connections, being a first-time writer for them?
It's been hard. I mean, it's definitely not what I was expecting. So trying to build relationships with players when I've never met them in person is very strange. Talking to someone via Zoom in a press conference setting is not the same as talking to them. And then getting some like one-on-one time after like a group kind of interview setting So that's definitely been the weirdest thing, but their WNBA has been great about access, and usually for the most part, if you want to talk to someone, you have it can be done. I think it's great, and it almost is like advantageous that they're all in the bubble together because you have opportunities for stories that like might have taken a little bit longer to gather, whereas you can like get on these media calls, like they have availability every day and you know what's happening, who's talking. So it's very simple, I suppose, from that side, which is really nice. So I think I'll miss that next year, but it's definitely hard not being in person.
Do you feel like, you know, how things are being conducted now that like it's going to have an effect on how things will be conducted in the long term? Like, I guess what I'm getting to is the way things were pre-COVID-19. Do you feel like we're ever going to get back to that as reporters? Or do you think it's going to kind of be like something different once like things start to really calm down nationwide?
I hope it stays the same. I mean, you can't, it's been really like not tough, but you have to get creative about the way you tell stories now. And I think, I mean, it'll be nice when we can just even get back into game environments. But I would hope that everything goes back to normal. I don't know. I can't say for certain. I'm sure people will try to like be like, well, you did your job during this pandemic without talking to these people in person and one-on-one. Maybe they'll try to utilize that. But I would hope things go back to normal.
And I mean, you also mentioned the Sky and the Aces with the playoffs getting ready to start over there pretty soon. Like, what other things are you looking at in the WNBA as far as, you know, postseason matchups go?
I'm excited for the playoffs. I mean, it's gonna be really fun. I think 5 teams have clinched spots, if I'm correct. I think it's 4 or 5 right now. So I mean, the Sky have clinched. The Storm are up there. I think the Storm will be one to watch, which is exciting with Sue and Brianna Stewart. So I think, I don't know, it's going to be a lot of, just like I said, and injuries too are the biggest. I don't know if we talked about that earlier, but just the way that this season is so like, it's very cutthroat on these players' bodies. Like the Sun had 10 games in 19 days, and their players some of them are very beat up just from the toll that takes on these people's bodies. So I think it almost might be a question sometimes of who can outlast the injury bug might be a big part on who has fresh legs. So how that's managed going into the playoffs is going to be crucial.
Yeah.
No,
Oh, you got another one, Rich?
well, I was gonna you know bring up the Sparks. I believe they actually might have got him recently as well. Like, what are you looking from them?
Let's see. They just played the Sky. No, excuse me. They just played the Sun. Sorry, the Blur is like, I know this sounds really bad. They're just so many games so frequently, but they were very good. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry what I'm looking for them, but they'll be good.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. How was it for you trying to find things to write about during the pandemic? Because usually, I guess the men and the women play kind of during the winter, and in the summertime, you don't really have to find stories in the summer because you have the WNBA who kind of play in the summer. So how was it for you after the pandemic with nothing to kind of write about? 'Cause usually that'd be WNBA season for you.
It's been good. I mean, I feel like I've been really busy just with the back-to-back WNBA stuff, covering all that kind of stuff. And then Uconn coverage, random recruits. I just got a new coach, a new assistant today was officially announced. So it's just a lot of things, which is great to keep me busy. It's not as much. I think it's a little harder with the condensed WNBA season, just for like I don't know, like planning purposes almost, but it's been just like back to back to back. So I feel very busy and there's almost too much to write about.
Yeah, you kind of talked earlier about how the women have kind of been a lot more dominant than the men. What do you think it would take for the men to kind of get back to how dominant they were? Because I think the early 2000s with Kemba, they had 1-1, and then with Shabazz, they had 1-1. So what do you think it would take for them to kind of get back to that?
I think they're really on the path to that. Dan Hurley's entering his 3rd year, so that'll be a fun kind of see what happens. They finished really strong too before everything was shut down. They were heading into the American conference tournament, and they had just come off like a 5-game winning streak. So it would have been interesting to see how that like transpired in the tournament environment or the conference tournament environment. But they picked up, I mean, the momentum is there. They moved back to the Big East. They picked up a really strong recruiting class over the summer, just in a span of might have been about 2 weeks that they landed all these recruits. So the momentum is there, and I think they do have what it takes to be. I would be shocked if they, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it works back for the Big East, but I do think they could make the NCAA tournament this season after a pretty long drought. So I don't know, and I think the pieces are there. So I think the momentum is really in their favor.
On the women's side of things, mentioning how dominant they've been, so many national titles over there, but the last couple of years they've not been able to break through to the championship game. What are you seeing from them, as far as trying to get back there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it'll be this season because the roster this year is going to be, it's half and half. It'll be half freshmen, half upperclassmen. So that is going to be interesting. But they brought in Paige Beckers, who's the number 1 recruit. They've always have a strong recruiting class. So I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how that meshes over this whatever season that it turns out to be. But I do think, and then they're in contention for Ozzie Fudd, who's the number 1 recruit for the class of 2022. So with the Uconn, the women, you never really can count them out. And them being out of contention isn't even them being really out of contention. It was a 3-loss regular season. So that is just an absurd metric. I think that was the most surprising thing for me this season, was just like the bar of success for them is so high that 3 losses is like end of the world for Uconn fans, which is, I mean, there were losses to the top 14 or I think it was top 5 teams, but it was Oregon, South Carolina, and Baylor, but still ridiculous to think about compared to like when you look at success for the men's game.
Did you feel like the expectations over there were high? Had they been able to get into a tournament?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because they were just getting hot too. I feel like those losses that we talked about, those were in January, and then early February was the South Carolina loss. So I think they were starting to find their rhythm. They won the American conference tournament right before things shut down. So they were starting to find their rhythm. So it would have been, again, interesting to see kind of how that played out. And you don't want to count them out. I don't think expectations really change regardless. I mean, Coach Geno Oriema is always joking about like, oh, this won't be the year or whatever, but you never know with them.
Yeah, definitely. How long do you think he'll still be around? Because he's kind of maybe done, I don't know, maybe everything you need to do there. He has multiple national titles and stuff. So how long do you think I know he's still kind of young, but how long do you think you think he's still here for the long run?
I'm not sure. I definitely think he'll stay the duration of Paige's career, and she's just a freshman this year. And then if they get Ozzie next year, perhaps that as well. I don't know. I don't know the quote off the top of my head, what he said, but he jokes about that like sometimes here and there, but it's hard to, I don't know. But I do think whenever he leaves, I wouldn't be surprised if another Uconn person comes in to take the reins, given that chain of success like we kind of talked about a little bit earlier.
Yeah, you talked about the Suns and how they kind of lost their best player this year, and they were in the finals last year. Do you expect them to maybe be able to get into the playoffs this year? And if they do, how far do you think they could possibly go?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they're number 7, I think, in the standings right now, unless that changed within the past couple hours. They were 7 yesterday. They started slow, which was kind of Kurt Miller, the head coach, had been like, it's going to take a little bit for this to get accustomed. They also had a very new roster compared to last season. So the pieces finally seem to be falling into place. I think they've won definitely last 2 games. So I don't know if it's last like 6 of 7 or 4 of 5, what it is off the top of my head, but they are like finding the pieces straight. But I think it will be the injury bug like it is for every team. So I'm not sure. The next couple games that they have coming up, they play the Aces, I believe, tomorrow, and then the Fever on Saturday. I think those 2 games will be really, really crucial to see how far, like, is this for real long-term playoff contention type of team.
Yeah. And do you expect, I guess a lot of people do expect, but what do you expect to kind of see from this year with everything that's going on with COVID? I'm talking college-wise. Do you expect them to have a season to allow fans? Like, how you just think the NCAA is going to go about it?
I definitely think, I mean, I would be very surprised if there's no season. They're trying everything they can to make some form of basketball work. There's been talk about bubble situations, about like using that period after when college is, I guess, empty out, even though that might look a little different this year, but like the period after Thanksgiving to Christmas, like really taking advantage of that time. So I think they're going to do everything in their power to do that. I believe it was just reported yesterday or earlier today that they're looking at like that day after Thanksgiving as a potential start date.
Yeah, if they do allow fans and I guess media there, do you plan on being there to cover the games, or you still would cover from home?
I would like to. I don't even know. I can't see, I'll be honest, like I'd be very surprised if they allow fans, given it being an indoor sport. Like it makes a little bit, I mean, who knows with everything happening, but I would be kind of surprised if fans are allowed. I don't think media would be I don't know, too much of an issue if like they're doing it with baseball where they're allowed in press boxes. And I think football's allowed to have media too. Whereas it's just like a little different with the bubbles, just in terms of like sending people. Like WNBA didn't allow any media besides, I think Holly Rowe is the only person there from ESPN, but she's been doing a phenomenal job. So I don't know how she is sleeping because I feel like she's constantly posting.
I guess I want to go back to the journalism thing a little bit. So from the questions that I had asked you earlier, for people kind of struggling to get their foot in the door, whether it be internships or just work, like what type of advice would you have for people like that?
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds, I guess, cliche, but kind of keep persevering or do what you can. Even it's hard because you want to get paid. If there's any opportunities you can take like part-time, or you guys are doing this, which is awesome. So this is a very good thing to have and show that you're still active and still looking for a job. It's such a unfortunate time just because of with everything happening. I mean, journalism's hard enough to get into without a global pandemic in the way. So I think just keep applying. And if you need to like take a job not in journalism, I think that's okay for if you can do it like I don't know, it's hard to do it on the side, I guess. I don't know. It's just no one would blame you for not, I feel like. And then if you want to go into it later, you have to do what you have to do. But still kind of keep up, like we talked about, maybe reaching out to people and just keeping looking up like the job hunt and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. You say you went from SI to the athletic. What's kind of been the biggest difference between the two jobs?
No, they both been great. I mean, for me, I think it's just like the job role that I have at SI. I was covering breaking news. So I was doing like shorter posts and just on a frequency, I had more like structured hours that I would report. And then if I wanted to do a story, I would do it like a more reported out type of story or like cover an event or something. I would do that on my time. Sometimes like if I had the time during the day, I would do that as well. Whereas here I'm doing that is my full-time job. I'm like a beat reporter. So I'm going to games, I'm covering, I'm out in the field. So I like that and wanted to make sure I was able, if I had the opportunity when I was like searching for a new job, that I was able to try and do something like that. So.
Yeah.
Do you feel like,
oh, go ahead,
do you feel like you missed the reporter role at all? Or do you really like what you're doing right now more so?
I like what I'm doing a lot. I mean, this is kind of what I want to write. So I'm definitely doing a lot of the reporting. Like I like the writing and the more creative features. So while I was able to try and do that at SI, I was able to do it here and there, not as frequently as I would have liked. So I've been able to do that here and have the opportunity to tell those stories. So I'm very, very happy about that.
Yeah, you said the Uconn women, they're in it they have the number one player coming this year and maybe next year. So what do you kind of expect from the number one player this year? And maybe if they do get the number one player next year, like how do you expect kind of their freshman seasons to go? Because, it's kind of tough coming in as a freshman.
I mean, they're a freshman. I don't think the expectations are there on the outside. I don't think they're there on the inside. I mean, maybe they are, but Coach Geno understands like it's going to take an adjustment period. It'll be, you have to get used to it, the college game and the pace and the speed and just the physicality of the players. He mentioned, I don't remember what he was talking about, but it was probably about Paige and just like reference to that number one player coming in, because I've had so many. There's only been really one who's come in and like right off the bat adjusted and was like perfect in the college game, and that was Maya Moore. Everyone else has had the time to take it to adjust to the college game. So I don't think, I mean, we haven't really seen her in practice yet just because of the start of the season, but the expectation isn't like to come in and score 30 points a game right away. They understand it'll take some time.
Yeah, I know they always have high expectations over there. And with them having the number one player this year and possibly next year, when do you think they'll possibly win another championship?
I don't know. I think maybe not this season. I wouldn't be surprised if they are able to get the pieces together for the following season, because they don't have a senior on the roster. So this year is going to be crucial for just because Megan Walker, who would have been the sole senior on the roster, she declared early for the draft and has been having a great season for the Liberty. But they, I think the meshing and the blending that will occur this year might be similar. You might get those 3 losses like last season, but I think that'll benefit them a lot come 2022 for a tournament, for a championship.
Unfortunately, this year, among many bad things that have happened this season, we lost Kobe Bryant and Gianna Bryant. She was pretty much just about a lock to end up at UConn. What was the atmosphere like when the news hit over there?
Yeah, so that was, I mean, I've done some sad stories, and I've reported on deaths and things like that. And that is the worst thing you ever have to do, and make that phone call to confirm a death or to talk to parents who've lost a child. But that was honestly one of the hardest days I've ever had to work. When Kobe died, we had just finished a men's game. So we were in the press box area or press room area when like news started breaking on Twitter, and we were all like, couldn't believe it. And like, it didn't really matter with those players too much because we didn't really break the news to them because it had just happened. So that was that. But the women were playing an exhibition game versus Team USA the following night. So Team USA has all these like fantastic Uconn alums on it. So they were playing that game the next night, and it was a very, very long day. And it was, there's like not even words. I wrote a story off of it because there was going to be so many storylines just being this Team USA game. Breanna Stewart was coming back from, I believe it was a torn Achilles. It was her injury for the first time she was playing in like almost a year. So like it was overwhelming. And to have the added effect of that, it was just a crazy day and just very, very sad because you had, the pros who were older and had some of them known Kobe, but then you have like the college kids as well, the Uconn kids. It was just a very strange day and very, very sad day.
Did you have any like insight on what their relationship was with coach over there? I know like during the memorial he had kind of talked about how he kept in contact with Kobe Bryant a lot, more specific, not so much with in terms of his daughter, but more specifically like coaching strategies and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know too much about like the coaching strategy stuff, but he popped by, I think it was the year before, he was in stores for a game. I mean, and some players had worked with him a little bit, I believe, had shared like photos of it. But he's Kobe, he meant a lot to that. And I think the Gianna impact and with Gigi, I mean, you can't really, UConn is UConn with the dominance and Geno, but him having Gigi and her affinity for UConn and her want to go play there just made that so difficult. And so that connection just, it was just a very overwhelming, like it almost felt like that's how, like it was almost a good thing that everyone could be together because you had these former UConn players coming back from Team USA who might not get an often chance to see Geno, and to be in that environment that's like a home environment, almost like a family. And that was something they all kind of talked about, that they really appreciated it more for that reason. So I feel like, yes, Kobe meant a lot to UConn, but even more so because of Gigi and what her future could have been with UConn.
Yeah. I kind of want to get back to the men's side. I kind of asked you about what do you think the women win a championship? I know you said that the men, they're kind of going on the right path, getting back into the Big East and stuff. But when do you think maybe, if it's not a championship, when do you think they'll be able to make another deep run into the tournament?
I mean, It kind of depends. They've got Book Night and a good group of returners who have been under like Hurley for the 3 seasons. Then they have another like strong recruiting class coming in. There's all these like good freshmen as well. There's Andre Jackson, Javante Brown, Javante Brown, excuse me. And then there's Therese Martin, who's a transfer from Rhode Island. So there's a lot of moving pieces. I don't know. I don't like playing the predicting game just because there's so many variables, but I don't know. I think in the next 4 years, I think they can make a run. I think the pieces, what really will be an interesting tell will how they adjust to play in the Big East versus the American.
Yeah, definitely. Could you give me someone, maybe people who's not in the limelight right now, but maybe someone from both, I guess, the men's and the women's, that maybe a player that people should be looking out for, that maybe have a big upcoming season, or maybe even in the future, someone that might have a good season coming up?
I think you should be looking out for RJ Cole on the men's side. He's had to sit out last season. He's a redshirt junior, excuse me, transfer. He is he's going to be, I think, like a good guy to run the ball, point guard, and just kind of important to work with, not only from like what he can do on the court, but then also that leadership aspect. I think he'll be asked to take on that role, just being a little bit older and having experience. Excuse me. He transferred from Howard. Therese Martin, I believe, is transferring from Rhode Island. I don't know if I wanted to get that straight. But look out for him. And then on the women's side, I think you should look out for Kristen Williams and Olivia Nelson at Doha. They are also going to be juniors, and along with Avina Westbrook, who's a transfer from Tennessee who had to sit out last year. I think those three, I mean, they're not necessarily underrated, but they're going to be stepping into bigger leadership roles. So I think those three will be interesting, especially Avina, because she didn't play last season.
I mean, talking about people to look out for, getting back to the WNBA, we mentioned, Sabrina IsESCO, what she brings as a rookie. What are some other rookies in the league that have kind of like stood out for you covering, the WNBA so far?
Yeah, no, watching Kennedy Carter is great basketball for her. And then on the Sun, Kyla Charles has really stepped up. And that's kind of, I guess, been the weird and good consequence of this season and these injuries, is that these rookies are getting such extended playing time than they might have gotten should there not been a bubble in the weird situation. Obviously, there's injuries and rookies and stuff, but it's been a lot of fun to watch them. And then Satu Sabali as well out of Oregon.
Yeah, definitely. I guess my last question to you is, actually, no, I have another question. Playing for the Suns, we actually, Beatrice Montpamir, who played for Miami last year, who actually got to cover, she's playing for the Suns right now. So what have you seen from her? I know she hasn't really got too much playing time this year, but I've seen her in there in a couple of games. So what have you seen from her and maybe her future in the league?
No, her and Kyla both have really good futures, I think. And again, where someone like Beatrice, she was like later round pick, it's been such a great opportunity for her because she was picked up. She was able to stay on the roster and stuff, but she's been really good defensively and has been in there. Like, you just see her kind of getting a block or getting the rebound. So Kurt's really, really talked about her toughness, or Kurt Miller, the head coach. So that's been fun to see her and Kyla. And then just working with the leadership that's on the Sun. They've got Tawana Bonner, who came over from the Mercury. There's Breon January, another Mercury transfer. I want to call them transfer, like they're college kids, trade deal. But what they've been able to get from those people this year, while also playing those extended minutes, because the Sun have been really short on players. So it's been fun to watch them.
And I guess my last question for you is, where do you want to kind of go from here? I know you're covering all three teams, kind of like we've been talking about, but do you want to maybe go back home towards Chicago, maybe cover a Chicago team, or do you have anything like, I guess, future plans maybe you want to get to, or maybe a dream job you maybe want to do?
Keeping my options open. I think the dream job would be just being able to tell stories, like longer stories, which I'm able to do at The Athletic, which is great. But just telling like profiles or features, that's a lot of writers' dream jobs. But that's always been, if I could find a way to do that, that would be awesome. Like the Wright Thompson from ESPN, or just like these fantastic profilers. Those are great opportunities and a really cool dream job for me.
I guess kind of sticking to the same theme. My final question for you would be, I know you said that you really enjoyed writing, but would you ever look into possibly get into more like on camera stuff in the future, or are you just like content with being a writer?
If it's offered, I mean, my on-camera ability, I didn't do a lot of it in college, so hopefully it's okay for tonight. If it, I'm open to whatever opportunities kind of pop up, and I think to be in journalism now, you have to be multifaceted or be willing to try different things. So that's something I acknowledge and I'm willing to embrace if needed. I do like the writing for me is just like a very comfort, and I think that is something I'm very good and strong at. So like anyone, I would need to work at being better on camera and doing other types of things like that, but not to say I wouldn't do it.
Actually, I got one more question. What is something you learned during your job experience that just being in school couldn't teach you? Like something that you thought like, yeah, college tries to get you as prepared as possible. But what was one thing that you learned on the job was like, man, college just couldn't teach me this?
I definitely think it's the building the relationship aspect of just being like a beat reporter, specifically as I took this job with The Athletic. Like you can tell yourself all these things you're going to do and the way you're going to go about that, but it's much different like doing it on a day-to-day basis and starting to build those relationships and just getting adjusted to that being full-time as a job as opposed to also being a student.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely want to thank you for coming on again with us. Great insight from you. So it's Rich, it's Kason, and that was Miss Charlotte Carroll of The Athletic. We will see you guys next time.